my project was investigating factors limiting community access to housing outreach programs in Indian River County. My name is Abigail Sylvia. So just to begin, I separated my project into 3 sections. I start with the introduction with a large emphasis on the purpose of my project and why I was super interested in researching housing programs in Indian River County. I split into 4 factors of why people can't always access housing programs in this county, specifically with sociological limitations, capacity funding, and structural limitations. And then to conclude. So my research question is, do personal, societal, and organizational limitations that exist limit accessibility to housing outreach programs in Indian River County, and to what extent? So, to begin, this research was conducted to understand housing organizations in Indian River County and how effective they are at meeting the need of the community. To begin, Indian River County is a very expensive place to live. For example, it costs $63,145 for a household, also called a family of 4, according to the MIT wage calculator in Indian River County. This places 51% of households in Indian River County below the cost of living, as the average household income is $52,336. Families are often described as being one emergency away from being in financial disaster. So typically, to call this population that lives below the cost of living is described as ALICE, an acronym that stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, and Employed. It describes the people who live below the cost of $63,000, yet live above the federal poverty line, which for Florida, as of 2023, is $30,000. These people do not qualify for benefits that people in poverty may receive, like food stamps or SNAP. To continue, around 50% of people in Indian River County are considered housing burdened, which means they spend more than 30% of their income on housing. And as rent grows around 9% each year in Indian River County, this becomes a huge issue for affordable housing. A great need exists in Indian River County. Luckily, it is a very generous county. Indian River County has a 5.6% giving rate of income, 2% larger than the Florida average and larger than the United States average as well. To continue, there are around 832 public charities that exist for community benefit. However, there is a large disconnect, and organizations can't meet all of the need that exists in the county for several reasons. People cannot access housing programs due to intergenerational poverty and social stigmas, capacity of organizations, lack of funding, location and organization of programs, required documentation and application demands, and programs and target demographics. So using these icons, I separate these factors into 4 separate sections: sociological factors, capacity, funding, and structural barriers. To begin, people can't access programs due to sociological factors. There are 4 sociological factors are certain beliefs, ideas, and barriers that prevent people from benefiting from housing programs. Factors such as intergenerational poverty cycle and parental influence, modern stigmas about asking for help, and societal pressures that parents feel the need to provide for children are all considered sociological factors. Intergenerational poverty is described as poverty that persists from one generation to the next. The National Center for Children in Poverty reports that for adults who experience low to moderate levels of poverty during childhood, 12 to 13% are poor at ages 20 to 25, and 7 to 8% are poor at ages 30 to 35. For adults who experience moderate to high levels of poverty during childhood, between 35% and 46% are poor throughout early and middle adulthood. Adults who experience poverty for most, if not all, of their childhood are much more likely to experience it in adulthood, which is an example of the intergenerational poverty cycle. It is further reported that recent tax records suggest that a child's expected annual income can be determined from where they live until they were 23. Intergenerational poverty limits people's access to housing outreach programs because of the attitudes attached to intergenerational poverty and self-sufficiency. Children see their parental figures navigate through poverty and believe in the idea that it is possible to achieve a better life without the help of nonprofit organizations. The Georgia Center for Opportunity reports that a large majority of parents and teens do not see themselves in a bad situation. As a matter of fact, a majority describe themselves as having strong footing. Therefore, generational ideas prevent people from seeking and accessing programs because they don't believe they require the assistance. To continue, modern stigmas about housing organizations are a great deterrent from getting help. The American dream, instilled into Americans since the 19th century, focuses on self-sufficiency and working towards goals. The American dream idea continues to live through society and proliferates the idea that asking for help is seen as weak or un-American. Media messaging depicts poverty as limited to one racial group to further stigmatize. Modern society has attached nonprofit organizations to the idea of losing self-sufficiency and self-identity. The idea of someone else controlling daily life is a great limitation to accessing help. Fully immersive housing organizations are often associated with loss of individual freedom. Immersive programming is a term to describe housing programs that provide accessible housing, financial assistance, personal counseling, and many more services to benefit community members to live independently eventually. Often, people who need help and access it are seen as incapable or weaker in society. To continue with capacity is also a large factor that limits access to housing programs in Indian River County. As of January 26, 2023, 925 individuals were considered as literally homeless. That means essentially living on the street. To continue, over 50% of Indian River County live below the cost of living per household, and with a 4.7 population increase in 2 years, families are moving to an area known for having high rent and living costs, and families are often one medical emergency away from falling below the ALIS level, which causes the need for housing programs. These are 4 examples of 4 of the largest housing programs in Indian River County. Hope for Families, Camp Haven, Habitat for Humanity, and Safe Space will all serve different demographics in Indian River County. However, considering that these are some of the largest housing organizations, they serve over 400 people a year. Considering that there are 923 literally homeless people, they're the largest housing organizations and don't meet enough of the need in Indian River County. To continue, every single one of these organizations has extensive wait lists, which often cause people to not be able to access housing programs. To continue, the PIT count, also called the point-in-time count by the Treasure Coast Homeless Services Council, counts how many people actively seek help in one single day, receiving services at campsites, feeding sites, and other locations. This is the number that decided that there were 925 homeless individuals, and was decided on January 26, 2023, that those were only people who accessed help in one day. To continue, this number was up 18% from the last 2022 Treasure Coast Homeless Services Council PIT count. 335 households were also considered to be residing in other households that were not counted in the PIT count. An additional 2,720 households were reported as doubled up during the PIT count, which means 2 households in a single family home, which is a 37% increase since 2023. These people are not covered in the PIT count, which covers how many literally homeless people are accessing programs and doing interviews in one single day. This means that these 4 organizations cover less than 10% of the need for adequate housing this year. To continue to funding is a factor that limits community access to housing programs as well. Contrary to popular belief, only 12% of nonprofit funds come from federal, state, or local governments. Government grants are often unsustainable and short options that can make an organization spend much more on administrative fees by working out grants and government money. That means that Indian River County charities are significantly reliant on private funding and revenue. Overall, all 832 public charities in Indian River County have made $382 million in revenue. These staggering numbers are supported by the giving rate in the county, which is 5.6% of income. although not all organizations are heavily funded, as 77% of the organizations in Indian River County operate with less than $50,000 of yearly revenue. Only around 135 to 165 organizations are well established and receive significantly more funding than many other organizations. These organizations earn much more due to a long-standing reputation in the county and meeting the needs of many in the county. With many organizations fight the need of different groups of people, donation and revenue often becomes politicized. Organizations are almost in competition for gaining donations for their cause. To continue, funding is absolutely necessary for housing outreach programs, as they fully support people in an extremely expensive area. Funding is always finite, and housing organizations are not always a donor's first choice. When donations are received, they are often accompanied by extremely specific demands, which determines where money is distributed into a program. This can limit where money is flowing into the organization and may be needed in other areas of the nonprofit. Not many housing organizations exist to begin with, and all organizations in Indian River County are in competition with each other for funding. To continue, structural barriers. The structure of an organization and the barriers that exist greatly limit community access to housing programs in Indian River County. Organizations often target a specific demographic, and different organizations serve different groups of people. Specifically, housing programs typically target motivated and willing community members that will be able to follow through with program lessons. If people don't meet the requirements of a housing organization, they likely have very little to no access to adequate housing. Location and organization of programs. Organizations are typically based in a particular area, and not all people can access a particular location without proper transportation. With limited days and hours that offices are open, it can become increasingly difficult for the homeless or those without adequate housing to gain help. In Indian River County Community Health Improvement Goals, Indian River County hopes to establish one community resource center in a low-income community in Indian River County where no community resource center exists, from 0 in 2020 to 1 in 2026. With 832 public charities, there are still areas where no community resource center exists, and one is being established every 6 years. Required documentation and application demands can cause community members to not be able to access housing programs in Indian River County. The complexity and length of benefit applications pose significant cognitive demands for certain people. Requirements for identification and documentation and the complexity of maintaining enrollment can be detrimental for accessing programs. The steps of application, processing, and even contacting that housing organization in the first place can be extremely difficult for a disadvantaged person. For example, Indian River County's Hope for Families has many requirements to access their services. Families must have a fully documented SHOT records and birth certificates, no felonies or multiple misdemeanors for violence or any sexual crime convictions, drug and alcohol free, physically and mentally able to work, and are considered homeless. If families don't fit this criteria, there are likely little to no programs available for them in Indian River County. Programs and target demographics can also limit community access to housing programs. Particular organizations offer different types of housing for different types of people and may not completely align with what a particular person/family needs. Organizations set themselves on a demographic, and people respond to that specialization, but not all people fit that grouping. According to Indian River Community Foundation's Indian River Indicators, community members are grouped into 5 groups, and not all groups are met with individual needs. For children, a safe housing opportunity for children removed from their homes due to abuse, abandonment, or neglect. For women and children, an emergency or transitional housing opportunity mainly for victims of domestic abuse. For men, emergency or transitional housing for men. Programs usually involve behavioral health services and financial literacy education. For adults and seniors, emergency or transitional housing for adults and seniors. These groupings represent all of the housing organizations that exist in Indian River County. And if people don't meet this criteria, they won't be able to find a housing organization in Indian River County. These grouping for these organizations exist because not all demographics can be addressed by a single organization due to different types of needs. As over 800 organizations exist, funding is already spread thin, and establishing new organizations to meet new demographics can be difficult due to competing with established organizations in the county. To continue, organizations typically focus on the biggest issue first, which typically means targeting demographics that require the most help. This research was to investigate the factors that hinder people from accessing housing programs in Indian River County by analyzing housing organizations' data, governmental documents, and community reports. The factors that stop people from accessing housing programs the most in Indian River County were funding and capacity. Indian River County has over 800 organizations, around 150 well-established organizations that have a large impact on the community. This creates lots of competition as many people require help from nonprofits, which can stretch the generous community thin, and not all organizations can get sufficient funding. With regards to capacity, it is a large issue in Indian River County as well, due to around 925 people seeking help from housing programs with an 18% homelessness increase rate, 2,728 households reported as doubled up, 335 households residing in another home, and a 4.9% population increase. Not only is there a great need that exists now, but organizations are not growing fast enough to meet the growing need. While organizations are at capacity, funding is finite, structural barriers exist, and sociological factors limit people's access. They are growing and serving the people of Indian River County to the best of their ability. This research is beneficial to all people of Indian River County to provide insight in the housing organizations that exist, the limitations of organizations, and how the community is being served. There are many ways to benefit these organizations in the community that exists: volunteering at Habitat for Humanity to build community members a permanent home, learning more about the community and what an organization needs for their members, volunteering at housing organizations, and educating yourself on those and those around you about the great need that exists in Indian River County. Thank you.
I'm going to begin with a question. What about the role of government in Indian River County in providing and allocating space and incentivizing development for housing that is affordable, rather than worrying about housing that is going to lead to either commercial value or serve the needs of those who are more affluent? Where is their initiative to try to make sure that that kind of housing is being built in Indian River County? I don't see that happening.
Right. There is a department in Indian River County which does focus on affordable housing because it is a very large issue that we're all aware of as residents of Indian River County. But I focused on more of the organizations that exist for Indian River County due to the diverse need that they serve, because there are so many of them.
The county's growing. It's growing very quickly in the western part of the county. The beach is fairly controlled. But I don't see any attempt to make housing affordable for people who are living in those threshold numbers that you're talking about. So most people who have to even move into the western part of the county have to have a certain income. And in my 23 years in this county, all I've seen is the cost of living in this county grow exponentially. And I'm thinking, well, where is the attempt to try to control and actually provide housing so that a variety of people can live in River County and not just certain people? Or to create, I will tell you, one of the first things that shocked me about Indian River County when I first came here, and really shocked me, was learning about Gifford. And the first time I went through it, I know I'm in the South. This is despite there's wonderful things that happen in Gifford, but just to drive through that community to see houses on cinder blocks that are like something out of another century. They look like slave quarters, and I was shocked when I saw this. Then of course you cross the bridge and you see another lifestyle. And it seems like when I look at 32963 and Vero Beach Magazine and anything that's in the news about Indian River County, it's all about, let's build up this for commercial purposes. And another very expensive condo complex is going up. Where is the will to create housing for this population? I mean, these organizations are never going to be able to meet that need. And it seems to me that we are becoming a place where you can't afford to live unless you're making a certain income. Where are the firefighters, the police, teachers are going to live in this county if this continues?
Absolutely. I think the numbers speak for itself. The fact that the average income in Indian River County is $52,000, but it costs $63,000 to live here officially. I think that speaks for itself. And I completely developed this project topic by myself as a resident of Indian River County. I have seen this issue play out in front of me.
I'm curious, how did you get interested in this topic?
Absolutely. So I researched a lot about the income and wealth disparity in Indian River County for a social justice paper that I wrote earlier this year. And my project kind of developed through that to specialize in the housing organizations that exist in this county, because they're great organizations that exist to serve a huge amount of people in the county. And like you said, they're great organizations, but they're just not meeting the need that exists.
And I'm not trying to disparage them. I mean, they're trying, but
Absolutely.
Again, they only have limited resources.
Mm-hmm.
So you developed through social justice an awareness of the issue, that this income disparity, which is a national problem, not just a Vero Beach or Indian River County problem, but and that led to this sort of investigation to this issue and looking at these organizations that are trying to address this. Good.
To piggyback on what Mr. Mitchell said, I know when you head west on Route 60, like out towards 95, there's a huge housing project going up right now that look like apartments.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody know that that's low-income housing? My hope was, as soon as I saw it, I'm like, oh, great, this is low-income housing. Do you know?
I'm not sure, but as I'm aware of, there are no active affordable housing being created at all.
I don't think so. I think that there, I have heard that like a price of like a 3-bedroom unit out there is far above.
Okay, so it's not something. I was hoping.
Yes, if you're looking at 63,000, and then that's pre-tax, I'm assuming.
Yes.
And then you start to figure out, okay, then what does that mean for a family of 4
Family of 4.
to survive with paying rent that was maybe $900 or how are they?
Oh, yeah, where do you get 900 from? Go live there.
But I mean, this thing, it's something that they could find rent like
Right,
that.
right, yeah.
Even then, how would they
Yeah.
survive in this county?
Abby, thank you, and good job focusing through. Following up on that, do you know, so I know you said, I think it was like 12% of their funding comes from the county. Does the county do anything else to help with, provide education, provide classes, provide help with filling out the forms and things like that to people that need help, or is it just they, kind of set aside this chunk of money and give it to the nonprofits?
I think for people who are accessing affordable housing, government help is not ever thought of. I think that's the focus of my project, is that the reliance falls onto the organizations that exist, and the issue is also there are not numerous housing organizations, in that they also are not being funded immediately.
So do you think it would be more beneficial for the government to increase their funding to these nonprofits so they could grow their capacity? Or would it be more beneficial for the government to maybe not give as much, maybe not give the 12%, but take some of that they have and specifically set up something in the county? Because it seems like there's nothing there.
I think there's just an immediate need for housing in general, especially affordable housing, and I focused a lot on the immediate need with organizations with affordable housing. I think personally, I believe that I think we only have two major, in Vero Beach specifically, as I know of, affordable housing areas that we've seen and have just recently been created. I think it would be more beneficial for government funding to be allocated towards affordable housing places for people who may not need the help of nonprofits. So I think that's what would be most beneficial.
Did you, and I know you focus on Indian River County, so you might not know, but do you know if there's any other counties in Florida or in the US where there is such great disparity between the highest earners and the lowest earners and like such a need for housing?
Yes, specifically St. Lucie County and Broward County, I think, focuses the most. Indian River County is considered, it's a little bit debated on the numbers because they're a little bit fuzzy because of COVID-19, but Indian River County is considered the 10th most diasporic county in the continental United States.
It used to be ranked even higher than that. We were in the top 3.
Yeah, it was third.
Yeah,
years
years
back.
Yeah. So actually, I'm happy with them.
Yeah.
Can you tell them about the work you did with Hope for Families, like how you spoke with people there and just got information? I thought that was like really kind of hands-on type of work that you did.
Absolutely. So I set up a meeting with Lydia Lander of Hope for Families. She is the marketing director of the program. I was able to participate in a tour of their 21-room facility. They are planning on expanding, but as of right now, they serve around 162 residents a year, typically staying for a period of around 8 months. I couldn't, because of safety reasons, I couldn't necessarily speak to the people and get firsthand experience of how they access the programs. I know specifically that Hope for Families has a very extensive wait list because not only do they serve families, they serve women and children. But I was able to see the different layouts of the rooms. They're typically single rooms, bunk rooms, and Hope for Families is considered an immersive housing program to where, which is a term they use to completely insert themselves into these people's lives so they can foster behaviors that people need in order to move beyond and live fully independently.
Are these organizations more religiously oriented, or are they open to all, I mean, in terms of, I guess, not in terms of like boys and girls, but more like religious terms?
So it gets a little technical with the definition of nonprofits versus public charities, but typically housing organizations are non-religious and just focusing on the specific housing issue, the largest ones that exist. But I do know that very established churches in the county do have smaller affordable housing organizations, but they're not to the scale that I researched them very much.
Is there a discrimination based on if you're Catholic or
I think that becomes an issue with the demographics that housing organizations tend to target. The 4 organizations that I mentioned earlier, one was for families, Habitat for Humanity is for most people. Safe Space is for women and children in domestic abuse situations and is transitional housing, which means that they are not fully staying through programs. They're typically there for a short period of time. And then Safe Haven is a male organization. So people are kind of sorted into these housing organizations, but yes, I would say that I wouldn't say that people who are unreligious would not be benefited by religious organizations, but I think depending on who you are kind of separated into these organizations.
The Safe Haven, that's the one for males, are those males who have substance abuse issues specifically, or is there something more to the story of the kind of clientele that they are trying to serve?
Typically, I didn't look specifically into Safe Haven because it only serves at max capacity 26 men in the entire county. And I think they typically focus on behavioral issues and kind of the surface of it. I don't think that people, for safety reasons, can benefit people with a lot of background with felonies and things like that.
And I thought Hope for Families was also primarily geared towards women who were in difficult situations and needing shelter.
I think that's kind of the way that the cards fall in the county. They do serve a lot of women and children, which is just kind of the way that society in general has fallen, is that women do, with children, they kind of split between Safe Space and Hope for Families, because that is typically how they end up needing housing.
Here's the, one of the other people asked questions, but what are the repercussions for the county in not trying to deal with this?
Absolutely. I think immediately homelessness increased with an 18% growth rate in 4 of the largest housing organizations only serving 400 people, which means they're meeting 10%. Very rough numbers, 10% of the need that exists for homelessness. And with the 4.9% population increase within the past 2 years, I think immediately it becomes an economical issue and a social issue that needs to be addressed by the county.
Are there any national or county regulations in relation to population and what you have to offer for low-income housing?
So like governmental regulations
Right,
with
in terms
population.
of you have this population, you need to have this amount of public housing or low-income housing. I'm just not aware of it. Is there any regulation like that demanding that?
I'm not sure. I think I remember a couple years back just being a community member when they were building the affordable housing units off of the feeder road in the mainland. That became up to community members. It became a debate with.
Oh, so no regulations, just more.
I'm not sure. I haven't
choice.
looked specifically into the governmental regulation, but
So, and
Very
I
little.
want to follow on that, because after I read your paper, I actually read this article in Bloomberg that was about Minneapolis, and in 2018, they had a policy where they, for zoning, they would no longer get permits for zoning for only single-family houses. It had to include some percentage of affordable housing, which they negotiated, which I thought was really interesting, and I'll send that to you. But yeah, it was.
2 days ago, there was a front page news on Bloomberg saying that the lowest inflation rate in the U.S. is in Minneapolis because of that
Oh,
policy.
because of that. So inflation rate is probably
absolutely.
one of the economic factors.
I just remember that when they did that, the homeowners
Oh, yeah.
were
Maybe.
It's a
not-
little outrageous.
They thought their property values were going to go south because of that.
So I don't remember how many years ago, at least over 10, when Disney, maybe it's 15 years ago, when Disney built their property in North Evening, they did the affordable housing on 8th Street, 12th Street. You see that it's a 12th and right near the Boulevard, Joel, and I'm talking about, and they brought in that affordable housing because they knew.
Yes,
they
that's
were
what I was
gonna-
referencing.
Okay, that's the one you're referencing. I wasn't sure. if this was-
Yes.
Water pond or some point, something like that.
But the thing is, there was a large
There's a huge
corporation.
backlash.
So that was driven by the corporation, again, not by the government. That was saying, Disney's big enough and wealthy enough to say, we need employees who work there and they need affordable housing. So why are more companies, don't have any companies in Vero Beach? Is that part of our problem, is we don't have a lot of industry? Because you look at something like that and they said, we're gonna build this so that we can run our
Not
business.
large one, but can afford it.
Yeah, Disney's a little, but yeah, have you heard of any other corporations that are doing that?
I'm not sure, but I think it's super important to address the idea of the people who are actually using the affordable housing. I think a lot of the problems with Indian River County economy is the seasonality of jobs that exist, and people who are occupying affordable housing are housekeepers, maybe for people who only live here for part of the year, and the seasonality of the county can often impact the income that these people earn.
Abigail, one maybe opportunities do you see for your next steps with this research? What does this, your findings, what does that mean for you? What plans do you have maybe to continue or take this further?
Absolutely. I think starting with the income and wealth disparity was a very great basis of understanding the organizations that exist. I think I want to look beyond housing programs specifically. I think that the numerous 832 public organizations, and also there are 944 nonprofits that exist in Indian River County. I would love to research the different purposes that Indian River County organizations serve. I think the largest number that pertain instead of like human services is health. I think that is a super important issue in Indian River County as well, and I think I'd like to look further into that.